Hey, everybody, and welcome to Learning from Smart People. I am your host, Rob Oliver, and I appreciate you being with me today. Our smart person today is Jessica Eastman Stewart. She is the founder of the Joyfully Managed Team. She is a former nonprofit executive who now helps leaders of teams lead with more ease and joy. She is on Instagram and she has a weekly email that includes 5 tips for life and work that you can sign up for. And I will put the links to all of those things in the show notes so that you don't miss them. In the meantime, Jessica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start here. Tell me a little bit about your backstory. How did you start? How did you go from being a nonprofit person to being in business, helping people with joy? Like, what's the journey?
Yeah, well, I actually started my career as a classroom teacher and then, saw that there were policies and practices in the school systems, at the state level and the district level that weren't serving kids or teachers or families. And so joined a group of folks and helped start a nonprofit education policy advocacy organization, and then spent a little more than a decade doing that as my professional work. It was an incredible opportunity, and we got to do a lot of impactful work. And I learned a lot about starting an organization and leading teams. And so about a year ago, I branched out on my own, and now I get to support folks to create the kind of teams they want to lead and the kind of teams they want to be on. And I love talking about everything from team culture to productivity and time management and all of those things. It is a joy.
Okay, so let's talk about this. What's the difference between the team that you want to manage and the team that you get sometimes? Like, is there a difference? Is that a fair question?
I think it's a fair question. It's not an easy question. Sometimes, as a team, you get to hire your own people and design, the roles that you need on your team and the work you're going to get to do in the world. And that can be an incredible thing. I've gotten to do that. I've also had the situation where I needed to step in and lead on a team that somebody else had hired and kind of designed. And they both come with their challenges and their beauty. So I would say both of them can be the kind of team you want to be on and the kind of team you want to get to lead, but it just takes a lot of intention in order to make that true.
Okay. I would imagine that they both come with their own complexity. And here's why. When I am assembling a team, I am generally tempted to create a team that has more players on it that look a lot like me and people that think the way that I do. And when you are given a team that is already in place, sometimes you have a diversity of viewpoints and it feels like there's some tension in there because of that. Can you comment on those two scenarios?
Yes. Oh my goodness. There is definitely that tendency to want to find people that quote unquote feel like a good fit for the team, which sometimes can be folks who are thinking and acting and looking a lot like us. And that bias is totally real. It's something to protect against because the best teams, and the research is actually pretty clear, the best teams are actually diverse teams who think differently, who look differently, who come from different racial and class and, identity backgrounds. And so, yes, building a team that you want, building that carefully requires a lot of self-reflection. What's the kind of person that I am? What strengths am I bringing to the table? And what differences do I need to surround myself with? And sometimes that's pretty straightforward and easy. I've heard plenty of leaders say, I am great at the public leadership or the strategy, but I'm a hot mess. And I really need people around me who are highly organized and can, bring that structure to the team. So sometimes people are incredibly aware of it. But there's often a lot of that subconscious, realizing, wow, I actually need somebody who pushes back on my tendency to A, B, or C,
Right.
and that can be uncomfortable, but it's so important if you want to have that high performing team.
Okay. Where would you say the balance is when you're creating a team between making sure that you are self-aware, but also that you have the end goals of what the team is going to accomplish in, in view as you put the team together. Like, where's the balance between those?
Yeah. I would say that the balance is you've got to have a team that works well together, right? So a team that has like an incredibly high amount of tension is not going to be effective together. And at the same time, if everybody is always agreeing on everything, you're unlikely to be doing work in the world that actually matters and is impactful, or is different in a way that is valuable. So I think the balance is somewhere in the middle. I honestly think that for folks who are struggling with this, and trying to find that balance, some sort of great executive coaching can be really valuable to help them figure out where are the potential blind spots that I've got so that somebody can kind of support you, but in a way that doesn't just, is helping you to uncover like, you have a tendency to, for example, avoid conflict. And this might be how that's showing up in your leadership and how you're building and coaching your team, or you have a tendency to want to, be really liked, by your team. And that can be really beautiful in some ways because you might be able to build a safe team culture, but it also might be a place where you're not actually giving folks the real feedback they need to do their jobs well.
Okay. Talk to me about this because you are talking about a joyfully managed team. And when you use the word joy, what does that word mean to you?
Yeah. I think, I have an instinct that joy might be the whole point of life. Like what else are we here to do other than get to live joyful lives? And honestly, that is why I got into education as a career to start my career, because joy is not as accessible to all of us as it should be. It's not evenly distributed. Not all of us have the same access to the choices that allow us to design lives that are joyful. And I wanted everybody to have access to that. And I think that, getting a great education is one of the ways that you can be able to make those choices in life. And so I want to create a world where everybody's got as much ease and joy as is possible. And I acknowledge that it's not the same for all of us and that, just life happens, to us,
Sure.
right? But I want folks to be able to plan for their joy because you get more when you plan for it. And to create system structures, routines, and, teams on purpose that allow everybody to have joy at work and at home and in life.
Okay. You brought up the concept of systems and everything, but before I get there, I've got a quick story that I've got to share,
Okay.
and that is there's a legend, and I don't know if it's true or not, about John Lennon when he was a child. Allegedly, his mother told him that the whole point of life is to be happy, and so he went to school, and they asked him like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he said, "I want to be happy." And so apparently the teacher brought him in and sat him down and said, "Listen, I don't think you understood the question," and then tried to help him understand what the question was. And legendarily at the end of it, he said, "Actually, I understood the question. I just don't think you understand life." So who knows if that's a true story or not, but I think that seems to kind of fit in with what you're talking about. Is that resonating with you?
Yes, it really does. And I think as I'm a parent and as I raise my kids, that's what I want for them. I want them to be happy, and I could go more in depth into what that means. But honestly, at the end of the day, that's the foundation of everything. I want my kids to get to have a happy life. And if I went one step further, it would be, and that they are helping other people have a happy life, that, and that could look so many different ways. But at the end of the day, I don't really care what they choose to do for money. I want them to be happy. And so probably we live in a capitalist society. They're probably going to need to have a job that creates some sort of money for them in order to be happy. But really, at the end of the day, if they get themselves to a place where they're happy and they're creating happiness for others, I will feel like I have absolutely hit a home run as a parent.
Excellent. I love the fact that what you're talking about is not just them being happy, but them creating an environment of happiness around them and creating happiness for other people. I love it. All right. So let's go back to what you said earlier. You're talking about systems and team function. Let's talk about this, right? Because it sounds to me, and I'm biased, and I'll admit this, it sounds to me like the opposite of joy is creating systems. Okay. So, how do you put those two together?
Yes, I think that actually systems create space for ease in life and for joy. And I mean I agree, I understand, and I'm not surprised to hear you say that they sound like opposites, but I believe they actually enable each other. And so I have just, learned over the years that folks who take the time to create the systems they need to do the work they want to do in life and at work are able to find more peace, more joy, and more effectiveness in what they try to do because they've created systems that actually allow things to happen without everything being a total hot mess and with things being really, really intentional and planned.
Okay, so talk to me about the process of like creating systems. What do you mean by that, and like how does that work?
Yeah, so I'll give a specific example. So, one of the systems that I really love for teams and for my business, and even in homes, is the idea of a polish week. And week, might be a misnomer because this doesn't need to take a week, and sometimes it can. It can be really effective. But when I was leading teams, we would take time twice a year to, and we would say, this is our polish week. We have to put it on the calendar pretty far in advance in order to make space. But during that polish week, we wouldn't have meetings. Folks could work when they want to work, how they want to work, but we had clear expectations of during this week, we're going to clean up, we're going to polish up our systems and routines at work. And we're going to we're going to clear the decks essentially so that every other week that follows is way more effective because we've taken time to kind of clean up, polish up those systems and routines at work.
Okay, so I live in Pittsburgh, and we have Polish weeks all the time, except there's a slightly different pronunciation. It's Polish week, and
I know.
okay, but the other thing is Pittsburgh. We speak our own language. Okay, we have words that we've invented, and you know, for example, the you plural here in Pittsburgh is yuns. But there is a concept that in Pittsburgh we talk about the fact that you need to red up. Okay. And red up is some kind of contraction of readying and tidying. And so what you're doing is when companies coming over, you have to red up before they get there, which you're preparing for them to come. And it sounds to me like what you're talking about is reading up for the future, where you're getting prepared to tie up all the loose ends from what's been going on in the past and be ready to kind of hit the ground running when next Monday comes. How does that sound to you?
Yes, that reading up sounds like a really good way to describe Polish Week for folks from your part of the world. I love that. Yes, and it's, Polish Week looks different for everybody. And I actually have a sample checklist that some folks have found some value in. But honestly, here's some examples. And not all of these will apply to everybody, but I feel like describing what you might do during a Polish Week could be really helpful. When I was leading my most recent team, here's the kind of stuff we would do. During Polish Week, we would spend some time in our email inbox unsubscribing from stuff we don't want anymore. We would update our internet browser bookmarks. So the systems, the documents, the resources we need to get to most frequently were bookmarked, and that random article that we bookmarked 7 months ago that we already read or we didn't read or we don't care about anymore is deleted. So it's not in our visual field anymore, blocking things up. We would clean up the desktop of our computer with all those files and logos and other things that we have still hanging out there that we don't need. We get rid of them and organize the ones we want to keep. We would put birthdays of our team on our calendar so we could be joyful teammates and say happy birthday to folks. We would update our calendar and call the question on, do we need that Thursday afternoon meeting anymore? Does it have to be an hour? We call those questions, clean that up. We start to say, you know what? I've learned that after every board of directors meetings, I really need some time to follow up from that. So let me make sure that I don't go from that meeting straight into another meeting. Let me go to every board of directors meetings and just put an hour and a half block afterwards. I've also learned that before our all staff gathering, I really need the whole day beforehand to get ready because, I just need to, I'm the person in charge of that. And I've got all these loose ends I've always got to do. So let me just go ahead and do that. We say, you know what, I've been having a no meeting Friday, and that's great. And now I actually want to see about no meeting Wednesdays too. So we revisit that. We brain dump all the, I've been needing to call that doctor. Let me just get that done. Get that out of my head. I've been needing to, clean up my desk. Why do I even store my hole punch on my desk? I use that thing once a quarter, and we just clean things up and just freshen things up and get things really ready. We update the data, we pull the reports, we reflect, all of that stuff that makes your work better, updating the software that you keep clicking snooze on, because it just makes things so much faster, but you got to create the space to do this.
Okay. You have hit on a couple of nerves with me, and I'm apparently going to, I don't know if I'm going to, I'll just say this, I'm going to have at least a polish hour once we're done here, because it is so true. I have accumulated bookmarks in my computer from a couple previous jobs and from a couple previous computers. And I think that there are things that are in there, duplicate, triplicate sometimes. And trying to find them, I've given up on visually finding them. I have to go do a search for them in my bookmarks. And the other thing is, I have tabs on my computer that are open for things that I wanted to look at. And I'm pretty sure they've been open for several months. And so I need to go through and clear out those things. Thank you very much for inspiring me and reminding me, like, hey, you know what? Sometimes in order to be more productive, you have to take some time you have to take some downtime in which you're not being productive. And can you help me put that in better words? Because it sounds like I'm saying it's a great idea to not be productive, but that's not quite the case, is it?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. It can feel like you're not doing work. If you were to take a whole day or a whole week to say, you know what, I'm just going to polish things up, it can feel like you're not actually getting stuff done. So I totally understand that. And that's the reality in some ways. And so the best way to find the space for this is to plan for in advance. If you want to plan, a whole day to polish up systems, you're going to have to look a couple weeks out at least and get it on your calendar. Especially if you want to create space for your whole team to be able to do this, you've got to look ahead. And then you've got to create some accountability. If it's going to be hard for you to take that time, you're going to have to figure out, like, do I need external accountability? Am I the kind of person that is only going to do it if somebody else is expecting me to do it? Then you might need to say, what about my polish work is the kind of thing that somebody else could be depending on? And let me let them know to expect that. Sure. Like, hey, I'm going to recreate the plan for our week during this time, or I'm going to, clean up our shared Google Drive, and let somebody know to expect that from you if you need that external accountability. But if you can create that space, and maybe you need to, take some of this habit science and like pair it with something you want to do, right? So the only time I get to watch my favorite Netflix show is also while I am cleaning up my desk,
Okay.
or while I am organizing my files, pair it with something you want to do, because creating space, it will make everything faster. And specifically to your tabs and your bookmarks, some people have this with their email where they're like, I'm going to get back to that email from October 2019. It's still in there, my inbox. I'm going to get to it one of these days. Sometimes you just need to declare bankruptcy on your tabs, on your browser bookmarks, or on your email. You just say, you know what, we're just going to start from scratch and delete everything. Or, say for email, I'm going to archive everything that is from a month ago or more. And there are ways to search your email for that. You can Google them. I lead a workshop on getting your email under control, and I show people how to do it, because sometimes you just think, I'm going to get to it. And you've got 9,000 emails in your inbox, or 114 tabs open, or 355 browser bookmarks. And sometimes you just need to say, you know what? I'm going to either delete all of it and just assume that if it's important, it will come back. Or I'm going to pick a date and say anything that happened before this week or before this month. I can just say that, you know what? I just got to clear the deck. I'm going to archive it, So maybe I can find it later if I really need it, but it's not going to be my inbox. It's not going to be my bookmarks. It's not going to be open, because your computer needs to get restarted every once in a while. Maybe that needs to be on the polish week, is restart the computer.
Right. Okay. I'm feeling very, very vulnerable right now. And I will tell you, I literally have one window that has 290 tabs open in it.
Wow.
And so
I think that's the tab champion.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that much. I love it. Congratulations. Here's your trophy.
Thank you
now
very
you can
much.
get rid of all of them.
Right. Well, I've got it. You know what? I don't have room on my desk for the trophy because I need to clean that up too. So we'll just, okay. I want to go back to this concept of joy that we were talking about, and joy when it comes to leadership, joy when it comes to a team. Does joy come from activity? Does joy come from a culture? Like, what is the way in which a team leader can really develop joy amongst the people on the team?
I think.
Let me ask this. Is it a matter of creating a joyful team, or is it a matter of finding joy in your own leadership?
That's a great question. I think it's both. I think that, joy can't come from outside, so we can't depend on a team to bring us our own joy. And at the same time, joy can be planned for in a group setting. So I would say, one thing the research is deeply clear about is that appreciation matters at work. And I think that's one place that joy comes. Folks have different kind of appreciation languages. Some people really like to be, words really matter. Some people, it's like little gifts to show that they were being thought of. So it can be different things and look differently, but Gallup has done research, of like literally millions of people, and the most engaged employees will answer positively to the question, I have been appreciated at work in the last 7 days. So appreciation also needs to be frequent, more frequent than people think. They're like, I said thank you to, Joe in July. So Joe should be appreciated. And it's like, well, that July was a while ago. Joe actually needs to be appreciated this week. And so I think appreciation really matters. And that's a great way to bring in joy. And I mean, people can use systems to support them, right? So if that's not your strong suit, then set a reminder on your phone. Send yourself an email and snooze it, and then snooze it every Friday and say, that email reminds me that I need to appreciate folks on my team. And say, that can be a text, it could be a Slack message, it can be an email, it could be a quick phone call, it could be a handwritten note, it could be a Starbucks gift card just to say, hey, great job this week. And the more specific, the better, right? So, if you can plan ahead for it too, like, oh, you know what, Jamal is leading our budget work, and I anticipate that he's going to get that annual budget approved by the end of June. So let me make a note that at the end of June, I'm going to send him a bottle of wine to say, thanks so much, for your work on that. That was a big lift, and you did a really great job. And you specifically, got us to a place that was better than last year in A, B, and C ways. I think appreciation is a big one for bringing joy to a team.
Okay. And how much importance is there on whether it's a symbolic appreciation or whether it's a tangible appreciation? And I'll give you an example. Okay.
Yeah.
I was working for a nonprofit, and we had one of the ladies who was there who just did a phenomenal job at what she did. And I felt like she was underappreciated. I wasn't her supervisor. I was just a coworker. And so I went on eBay and I bought a bunch of $1 million bills, and I wrote her a little note, and it said, like, we're at a nonprofit. You don't get paid what you deserve, and you don't get the appreciation you deserve, but I want to let you know what I think you're worth. And so I did it, and I was embarrassed to death because she actually took the letter and the $1 million bill and taped it up on her door because it meant that much to her. Okay. And it's completely symbolic. You can't spend it. You can't anything, but can you talk about and we're almost out of time with this, but can you talk about the difference between getting something that is symbolic in nature versus something that is tangible in nature?
Yeah. Well, I love that story. It shows how much appreciation matters, and I think honestly, it really depends on the person. And actually, there's a book called Languages of Appreciation. It's actually connected to the like love languages that a lot of folks have heard of, right? That
Right.
we receive and give love in different ways. The same is true of appreciation. There's actually a quiz folks can take, a little book they can read. I've done that with my teams, and I've done some trainings with some other teams these days to help them figure out what is everybody's different language of appreciation. And it's not that everybody can't appreciate different types of appreciation. Some people love gifts. Some people just want to be, given like a really kind note and words. Some people, if they want time with their manager, and if they're not getting time, they feel really underappreciated. Like if their check-ins are always getting canceled, right? Some folks really want people to appreciate them by helping them out. Seeing like they are busy and they want to be appreciated by saying, "Hey, is there anything I can take off your plate? Let me help you out with something, or can I take that little task off and do those calls for you?" So you can really supercharge appreciation and joy in your team by getting clear about what matters most to everybody and what their style is. But honestly, even the smallest thing of saying, we're going to put 5 minutes at the beginning of every weekly team meeting, and this is a space for folks to appreciate each other. That is a very easy, simple thing. And folks can just say, I want to say appreciation to Daisy because last week she just really did an incredible job at creating that graphic and turning it into a video. And people loved it. We got lots of great feedback on that, right? And you can have your team do it for each other. It doesn't have to all come from the leader of a team, but there are little ways. And then if you really want to take it to the next level, you can use a resource like that book, the Languages of Appreciation at Work, and really dive deep into your team. But honestly, whatever you do is going to add value, especially if you're not already intentionally bringing that appreciation into the team.
Very cool. A practical suggestion, and I appreciate that. Listen, Jessica, it's been wonderful. If people want to learn more about you, learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so people can get on my email list. I send a email every Friday with just tips for more joy and ease in life called the Friday Five, which is my favorite thing. They can find me at jessicaeastmanstewart.com. And if you go to jessicaeastmanstewart.com/freebies, there's like a Polish Week checklist if you want to, that you can actually edit and make it your own. There's also 12 pages of meeting icebreaker questions because I think those can bring joy to a meeting and kind of getting people into asking fun questions of each other and connecting as human beings. I'm on Instagram at Joyfully Managed Team with kind of daily leadership tips and productivity. And I'm also on LinkedIn if folks are there, Jessica Eastman Stewart, and I try to share, the best things I'm finding and thinking about work and leadership there every day.
Cool. And I will put those links in the show notes so that people can connect with you. And that's awesome. Hey, Jessica, thank you so much. It is now time for 3 questions to establish your humanity. Are you ready for this, my friend?
I mean, as ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. Do you know if you are related or even distantly related to anyone who is famous? Are there any famous Eastmans or Stewarts back in the line?
That is so interesting. Honestly, I don't think so. My grandfather's name is John Glenn, but not the famous one.
Okay.
And then maybe there's a connection to Eastman Kodak, maybe.
Yep.
I'm not totally sure. I haven't figured that out, but now you're kind of making me want to go look into that. But my parents would always say, like when people needed to spell their name, like Eastman, like Kodak. So maybe the Kodak company somehow.
There you go. That works. Okay. This one is an overrated, underrated question. The Star Wars franchise, overrated, underrated as far as quality of movies.
Maybe I'm a Star Wars fan myself. Not like the biggest Star Wars fan, but like I'm a fan and think that everybody should watch it. So I guess I would, but it is pretty. I think it's appropriately rated.
Okay.
I like Star Wars. It's great. And it deserves its fame, but I'm not going to say that it deserves like twice as much fame.
Okay. That's fair. Okay. If joy was a food, what food would bring joy to Jessica Eastman Stewart?
Chef Boyardee canned spaghetti and meatballs.
Really?
It is my favorite comfort food. I eat it for lunch at least one day a week, sometimes up to 3 or 4 days a week. And it's a little embarrassing, but I've started to just embrace it because I feel like a child. I strongly believe that it is. I mean, like one time we got grocery delivery and they accidentally brought us like 10 cans of SpaghettiOs. And I was like, who eats SpaghettiOs? This is gross. Like, what am I, a child? And my husband was like, just because they brought you the wrong brand of canned spaghetti, I don't know if you can just say this one's ridiculous. But I was like, this doesn't taste good at all. But Chef Boyardee spaghetti and meatballs is delicious, and it deserves to be eaten multiple times a week. So it brings a lot of joy, and it reminds me of my childhood, and I love it.
Okay.
And I'm not sorry.
No, no apologies necessary. You are in a judgment-free zone here. I will tell you, quite honestly, I understand where you're coming from. My wife was raised no canned products, like really, like canned soup, not really, canned spaghetti, no. That I was raised on Chef Boyardee and Campbell's soup. Like that was when it was lunchtime. There was going to be a can opener, and it was opening some form of deliciousness. And ever since I've been married, my wife's like, yeah, no, nobody needs to eat that. Nobody should eat that. And every now and then there's a little piece of me that's like, that wouldn't be a bad thing to eat. It would take me back to a fun and happy place. Hey, listen, Jessica, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you answering my questions. I appreciate talking to you. What you've brought is proof that you are indeed a smart person. To all my listeners, I will remind you that when you stop learning, you stop living. Have a great day, everybody.